So this one actually is a rare one. Rare one for various reasons, but the most important being that this headline on the front page of the very corrupt, racist, and criminally oppressive denier of justice normally is accepting the need for justice for the victims of the denial of pension. So this pension justice. Now this pension justice encompasses, includes, and covers a wider range than the word pension may suggest. And both the London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council and the London Borough of Newham Council are guilty of abusing their agency role in the context of kind of serving the needs of people in low income or poor people or people in poverty, combined with the housing needs. So the idea of the council housing also includes the idea of welfare as represented by the provision of council kind of paying most of the rent in council housing for the low income people. That is called housing benefit. And the equivalent, the corresponding one, is for the tenants in properties that are privately owned and rented out, and that is called local housing allowance. In the control of the allocation of housing benefit and local housing allowance, both Tower Hamlets Council and Newham Council have been habitually, routinely lying and breaking the law. And the lying and the breaking of the law is not a secret. It's being openly perpetrated with the knowledge and the tacit and open complicity of the local members of parliament. In this case, or in the cases that I'm referring to, Rushnara Ali and Jim Fitzpatrick were colluding with Tower Hamlets Council breaking of the law and robbing of the poor and the robbing of the entitled and robbing of many of the people in pension age group or pensionable age group. Same thing is happening. Same thing is true of Lynn Brown and Stephen Timms in Newham, the two of the MPs in Newham. And there is no recourse. There is no recourse against these corruption and criminality, literally theft, under both the main bodies of the Theft Acts, 1968 Theft Act and 1978 Theft Act, as amended and whatever. The local councils have been stealing the money that belongs to claimants that are legally claiming the benefits, housing benefit, the local housing allowance, as well as the housing, council housing. And anyone who is new to this particular broadcast, which is coming from London and is presented by myself, Muhammad Haque, created by me, designed by me, and it is part of the movement defending the community in the East End of London and the movement defending the communities across the country by upholding the universal values of ethics, morality, neutrality, transparency, accountability, and democracy, as widely defined, as universally defined as can be possible. And so therefore, I'm doing this based on ongoing investigation, empirical and wider. And investigations mean investigations in the most rigorous sense of the term. And when I say that John Biggs, the incumbent mayor in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets at the expense of the community in Tower Hamlets is a liar, I do not say that as a lazy word. I say that as based on the evidence of John Biggs being a liar. It's not a word that could be avoided. He is a liar. And he's an intentional liar. So therefore, whatever drove his intention and drives his intention is to be added to the liability and his culpability and criminality and wrongdoing. And the same thing applies to his counterpart in Newham at the expense of the people and community in Newham, called Roxana Fiaz. She's a liar. And again, the purpose and the motive that drives her lying has to be added, as I have said, should be added in the case of John Biggs. So these two liars are being able to lie their way and rob the pensioners, and that kind of robbery is not being covered in this kind of court case that was actually ruled on yesterday and is being followed up in a kind of aggregate way by the Daily Express in a rare display of connection with reality of the poverty creation agenda that is operated by successive central government agencies and regimes. So I am not satisfied that the Daily Express is doing this as a change of policy of editorial kind of line. It is because it has no, I'm asserting exclusive original diagnostic assertion. I'm saying that the similar outrages as the outrage against the pension denied victims has been perpetrated now by this ruling and represented by this ruling. Similar outrages are perpetrated by the Boris Johnson regime in other respects, in other departments, in other fields of the connection and duty owed to the public and the community and the particular claimants. And yet the Daily Express never does that, never runs front page splash on those violations. What I am asserting here is that the reason why the Daily Express is doing this is because it has run out of any brazen line to run, at least today, in praising Boris Johnson, which is what it does. It is primed to publish anything with the slightest excuse to praise Boris Johnson to the stratospheres. And Boris Johnson, as has been admitted by even some of his, quote, supporters or fans, was looking ill, unwell, when he was being scrutinized by Ed Miliband on the occasion of his bill, the law-breaking bill that Boris Johnson presented or moved in the House of Commons on Monday. And it was responded to by Ed Miliband because Keir Starmer, who would have responded to it as the leader of the opposition, was apparently, reportedly, kind of asked to self-isolate due to the fact that a member of his family had contracted COVID-19 or been kind of connected to the infection somehow, which resulted in Keir Starmer at short notice pulling out. And therefore, it was decided by Keir Starmer, of course, that Ed Miliband would stand in for him. And it was a very, very important, salutary kind of incident that it did. These little incidents happen, these kind of coincidences, let's say, series of coincidences happened. And Ed Miliband staged a return to, like, after 6 years or so, whatever, of being out of the front kind of bench. he staged a return that was very well justified and well kind of timed, because there has been a number of people observing that Ed Miliband should not have resigned as leader of the Labour Party in Parliament after the 2015 election. Or 2010 election, and after the defeat, whatever the latest date was, we shall check on that one, because his resignation was followed by the appearance of Jeremy Corbyn, and people have observed in the last kind of 48 hours that perhaps Ed Miliband should not have resigned. Perhaps he should have stayed. And I think that on the basis of his performance on Monday in scrutinizing and exposing Boris Johnson the way that he did in the particular 2 minutes, and although his speech was longer than 2 minutes, but the points that came across and the crux of the kind of intervention exhibiting the skillful way that he demolished the myths around Boris Johnson and completely finished Boris Johnson as a liar, came in a couple of minutes. And it included the theatrics, they included the kind of body language and the style and the dramatic style in which Ed Miliband said, "Come on, tell us, I give way," that kind of thing, summed up and contributed to the image of Ed Miliband as a far better fronter and the leader of the Labour Party at this moment than anybody else, including Keir Starmer. That is the point I'm making. And I'm suggesting that if Keir Starmer is discredited by the majority of the people in this country, witnessing him failing to stop Boris Johnson and his calamitous disregard for everything, rule of law, due process, duty and care and all the other things, then Ed Miliband should be the leader again. And Ed Miliband should be the leader, not because his name or whatever, but because the skill that he has shown, he has learned, and the conviction and the confidence he has got. And this is the time that he should be kind of invited to lead the Labour Party, I'm saying. And there is a mixture there, because the mixture is that, well, you know, some people will say whether he's right-wing enough, left-wing enough, middle of this kind of two divides. It doesn't matter, because Corbyn was very much, compared to Miliband, very much on the left, but didn't make any difference. So what we need is a very committed, rigorous, clear kind of opposition that tackles the lies, that deals with the lies and incompetence and failures and the negligence. And that is the first thing. Even if he is not the leader for the next foreseeable future, if Ed Miliband has a kind of reason to stand up in the House of Commons and stand up for the people outside the House of Commons and take similar, rigorous and extensive and evidence-based, facts-based kind of swipe at Johnson or whoever is fronting him after Johnson is replaced, which is absolutely bound to happen, then the country can expect some kind of sanity, some kind of reasonable prospect of governance, responsible governance. Now, going back to the behavior of John Biggs and Roxana Fias, both of them are Labour Party card-carrying careerists. The role of the central government, as personified by Boris Johnson and others, it doesn't matter when it comes to day-to-day experience of people ordinarily, let's say outside the time and the frame of the COVID-19 crisis. Because day-to-day encounters of people in the local councils include comparatively less glamorous things, but these things matter to people, add up to people's lives quality. The street, the road, the transport, the school, and all the other things, generally outside the COVID crisis and emergency. And individual encounters and relationships and contacts between the council employees and the person at the receiving end of the council employees' decisions and behavior make severely important difference to the quality and the very existence of many people's entitlements and everything. And I have got decades of experience and evidence of lying by council employees. Think about that. How many newspapers, how many columnists like George Monbiot on the Guardian, how many George Monbiot columns have been dedicated to or even referring to the brazen robbery and injustice perpetrated by the Armed Council or Niyom Council through their lying, unaccountable employees? And that raises the question as to who are these people? Who are these people that are beyond any accountability, beyond any answerability to the victims of their decisions? Who are these people? Who keeps them in place? And I have to remind the viewer, anyone watching this, wherever, and this is against the policy, that we don't recruit viewers and we don't recruit friends and we don't recruit followers. Anyone watching this would be doing that as if they were reading a book somewhere. They find the book, they look for the book. That is the basic principle. We are publishing this. This is unique, exclusive, but we are not promoting it in any way. If there is any access to this by anyone, that would be beyond our kind of prescription or our project. The fact is that we put it on post and we post it, make it available, accessible. And that is the maximum we can do. And the quality of it is what matters. And the quality is unique. And the quality, as I have said, is unique because nobody else is doing this. And nobody else could do that just because they wanted to say it. It takes entire decades of actual evidence gathering, fact gathering. And that is far more daunting than just becoming a councillor or becoming an MP. Far more demanding, far more time, energy, resource demanding than any kind of attempt at becoming a quote elected MP or local councillor entails. So that is the comparison. So anyone who is watching this should consider the fact that these contents are not being delivered as a gossip. These are not kind of products of some kind of whim to share some kind of gossip on. It's not out of boredom. It is the opposite. Investigative, rigorous, independent, objective analysis based on evidence. So anyone who says that I'm saying the wrong thing about the Daily Express today should check the last 60 years of the Daily Express before they can say that I'm saying the wrong thing. Because the Daily Express, although it is not in terms of circulation currently, or has not been for quite a long time, a leading newspaper, but it is still there in Fleet Street, as part of Fleet Street, just as it was. Of course, it was circulation-wise in a different league, in a bigger league than it is now, but it was there when Churchill was in post and in power and in political play, and his one of his stooges and his suckers was Beaverbrook, the Canadian. And the paper was absolutely disgusting then, and it has been disgusting for decades. And it is one of the reasons why the mind of the Little Englander supporting gullibles is so poisoned with racism, with prejudice, with kind of the wrong information about society, the wrong information about the duties of government. And all the columns that appear, all the opinion columns that appear in the Express in 2020 are hostile columns, prejudiced columns, racist columns, although the numbers of readers is significantly smaller than it was for a long time before. The implication, the impact of this persistent lying and poisoning by the Express and its contents has been very bad for society, and it has been diseducational. And the same thing applies to, of course, on a bigger scale to the readership of the Daily Mail and the scum, dirty digger Rupert Murdoch scum. Scum is the word that I have coined for this scum, but other people have done that as well, independent of any consultation or conference with me, because the conclusion is inevitable based on the role of the scum. Anti-social, anti the poor people, anti-democracy, anti the environment, anti-justice, and anti-migrants. Of course, anti-migrants is followed by, currently, the scum being anti-Muslim. And I don't speak as part of any agenda defined by any particular Muslim group. I'm talking demographically, I'm talking objectively, I'm talking factually. If they were attacking the Sikhs, S-I-K-H-S, the Sikh people who are also discriminated against in Britain by the media and the mainstream, I would have been talking about the Sikh people or the Buddhists. And the Buddhists have not been, not only not critically analyzed, especially in the context of the events in Burma, where the Burmese, controlled by the agenda pursued by the Buddhists there, committing genocide against the Muslim Rohingyas. So the Dalai Lama, who is kind of a icon across the West, Dalai Lama has been very silent about Burma and the Muslims' genocide. And none of his fans in the West, including many in the readership, among the readership of the scum and the Daily Express, they have not pointed that out. The Dalai Lama has been promoted as an anti-Chinese kind of freedom fighter for the Buddhists. But he has been completely complicit, this time with the Chinese approval of the genocide by the Burmese of the Muslim Rohingyas. The Indian approval, Indian, that is Narendra Modi and his BJP Brahminists kind of fascists, approving of Aung San Suu Kyi fronting the genocidist regime. And this is the other part of the diagnosis of the media. It is not just diagnosing the Fleet Street headlines. I'm diagnosing, this campaign is diagnosing the contents, the narrative, the agenda, the connections and the implications. So it's not just about the newspapers, it's about the politics, the parliaments, the personalities and their connections. And this movement, defending the community in the East End of London and defending the values of universality, ethics, morality, accountability, transparency, and democracy, and justice and fairness, are also being promoted and advocated for and advanced by the Khoodeelaar campaign. Khoodeelaar is a Siloti word, and it has been in action defending the East End of London from various bouts and plots and attacks against the Brick Lane area, eastern of London area, where the Bangladeshis in the main have been one of the main demographic components and cultural components and social components. And my own involvement in the defense of the community in the East End of London started in June 1963. I wasn't physically in the East End of London, but I started this remotely for the same reasons that I have been continuing the battle, defending the community since then. And what has happened with the Daily Express, not talking about Tower Hamlets Council corruption and criminality, not talking about Newham Council's corruption and criminality, not talking about Lambeth or any other council's corruption and criminality, is not an accident. Because the agenda run by the so-called media mainstream is not an agenda based on any of the factors, any of the values, any of the ideas which propels us and keeps us as a movement active in defending those values: ethics, morality, universality, accountability, transparency, fairness, universality, and democracy. And all of these values are alien to these newspapers: the Express, the Sun, the Daily Mail, and the Star. Now, the Star, I will have a footnote here, just a reminder. The Star was in 1988. The Star published a front page and an inside kind of hysteric racist piece. The Star was just a recently established title. The Star published in 1988 a racist attack about a family in Hitchin in Hertfordshire. And it was based on housing. And it alleged that the person is a Bangladeshi man, Abdul, was given council housing because of his large family, whatever, and it was racism and anti-racism gone mad. And the editor of the Star at the time was a man called what's his name? Hitchin, I think. That was Hitchin, and his name was Hitchen, T-H-E-N. So this racist coverage outraged common sense, and I organized a campaign at that time called Campaign Against Racist Media Attacks Against Bangladeshis in the UK. And that was in an abbreviation. It also transliterated into a Bangladeshi word, Kormo book. I deliberately coined it in a way that it would do that. And that was one of the first campaigns against the media racism that I independently organized. And it was done actually within the years of the BBC Two channel airing a thing called called the King of the Ghetto. King of the Ghetto was written by Freak Dondi, and it was a kind of assault aimed at the Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets, and the Bangladeshis especially synonymizing the Bangladeshis with the Brick Lane area. And the BBC used that as an excuse to pay loads of money to Freak Dondi. And Freak Dondi exploited the whole situation and created a series of fictitious kind of campaigners in the King of the Ghetto. And it completely wrote out the Bangladeshi community and imposed a fictional number of people that were saving the Bangladeshis from racism. So the BBC aired the series of King of the Ghetto on BBC Two in May 1986. And so therefore that is the kind of other thing that campaign against racist media attacks against the Bangladeshis in the UK campaigned against. So although it wasn't the kind of same name, but it was the same kind of inspiration, motive to defend the community against such targeting and attack by the mainstream. There has been no community. There has been no community like the Bangladeshis and the Siletis that has been targeted by the mainstream in this country in the way that the Sileti-speaking Bangladeshis have been targeted by the BBC, by the Sunday Times and others. So it raises the question, why? What is it that the Bangladeshis have done that is wrong, that has warranted and justified these repeated attacks on the identity of the Bangladeshis and the rights of the Bangladeshis and the presence of the Bangladeshis in London, especially in London in Brick Lane? The previous attack was in the magazine, Sunday Times magazine, dated the 2nd of December, 1973. Again, which is, I've discussed this before, but that was also done completely without any justification, any reason. Because whatever the Bangladeshis were doing at that time or had done up to that time, because it was only a new idea, the Bangladeshis, it was East Pakistanis up to the end of December or middle of December 1971. So it was just a year, a few months since Bangladesh became a recognized political kind of entity, and the people who came from there as migrants had come from East Pakistan. And so their kind of identity generally in terms of antecedents and countries of origin got transferred because of the events that took place after they came here. So they became Bangladeshis. But the focus was not on their community as Bangladeshis. The focus was very craftily done, and it was the Siletis. They actually distinguished the Siletis from the rest of Bangladeshi population. And they created the dichotomy, the difference that Bangladeshis were one entity, the rest of the Bangladeshi community, and the Siletis were another. So they targeted the Siletis as being also the most uneducated, the most kind of backward, and the poorest, in the now recognized state of Bangladesh. That's absolutely untrue. That was untrue in 73, and that has been untrue even before then, and it is untrue, of course, now. Because Sylhet, as a kind of geographic region, as a social region, as a part of the country, as a part of the subcontinent, has been very rich in natural resources, in terms of culture, in terms of the backgrounds of people that form the population in Sylhet. So for them to Sunday Times to kind of reverse this, distort this, and put all of that upside down and accuse and brand and label the people of Sylhet as the opposite of what the people of Sylhet were, had to have been done by some kind of decision to mount that kind of attack, because this wasn't the natural kind of state of Sylhet, and this wasn't the natural identity of the people from Sylhet and the people of Sylhet. So the Khoodeelaar campaign actually refers back to the campaign that I started in 1973 in defense of the community, and have been continuing at various stages. And the details of that kind of series of campaigns would be, of course, contained in a dedicated separate edition. But essentially, the media's, this is the illustration of a kind of, quote, leading British newspaper kind of being misled, completely misled by whoever decided to mount the attack on the Siletis then. And the BBC was similarly misled by Freak Dondi. Now this one we know the identity of. Freak Dondi and his co-crooks, Dirty Howe, and others, we know their identities. and we shall be devoting a number of programs on exposing Freak Dondi, who became a crook Dondi. And we shall be mounting the long overdue kind of, if you like, review, an update on why the Freak Dondi was allowed any claim that he knew the Bangladeshis or he had any care or concern, because he, as a Parsi coming from southwest India or background, had nothing to do with the Bangladeshis. He never had anything to do with the Bangladeshis. He could not have anything to do with the Bangladeshis. He never came to the UK with any kind of connection with the Bangladeshis. And his so-called wife, Mala Dondi, was not a Bangladeshi. She was not even born in Bangladesh. She was not even born in West Bengal, where her own antecedents and ancestors were from. So why did the two get kind of allocated money by Channel 4 then and others, BBC and mainstream media? And both of them had been claiming not only that they were they understood Bangladeshis, but that they were saving the Bangladeshis in the east end of London. How did that happen? So we shall be examining all these kind of connections, and we shall be answering the questions. When Freak Dondi's King of the Ghetto was last screened, the last of the 4 parts, the last part of the 4 parts was screened, we had a demonstration on this last day, I think, the 22nd of May, 1986. And I have empirical evidence of a criminal gang that watched our demonstration outside the BBC in White City and followed us after the demonstration, plotting to mount a physical assault on the demonstrators. We shall be asking questions about who they were and who in the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets in Brick Lane knew about them and knew them and had any contacts with them, any relationship with them. And we shall be examining the events on that day and its links and the role of the local Labour Party played in aiding the racists who plotted the attack on the demonstrators. One of the so-called ethnicity-linked media is a Bangladeshi language outlet called Shurma. It had on the front page in May 1986 a piece about our demonstration outside the BBC at White City, and its headline and the first starting kind of paragraph was a question. It wasn't a kind of positive report saying that the community demonstrated against the BBC, but it was a focus on attacking the organizer of the demonstration, which is myself. So we shall examine the role of the Shurma and the role of the ethnicity-linked outlets that are many of them are no longer in publishing, but did publish over the years. And we shall see how racism and anti-Bangladeshi racism, anti-Siloti racism, anti-Muslim racism combined to create the state of backwardness in terms of the economic condition, in terms of the educational level of attainment, in terms of the housing and other kind of status of the Bangladeshis, Siloti-speaking Bangladeshis in this country. That is the linkage, and we shall be extrapolating from that study, that examination, to apply to the other parts of the demography of the UK, including people from Africa, various people from African countries, people from the Caribbean, and people from the backgrounds in Pakistan and India. And we shall show how the media, in various guises, in various forms, has been completely misconstrued and misconceived and has been contributing to the denial of rights and denial of entitlements, and to the kind of suppression of the enlightenment, suppression of the evidence, education, and the facts that are so vital to the understanding of people in society and the people who are in places to deliver services to the people who need and are entitled to those services, and how those have been squandered. Now, squandered is a word that I used about Tony Blair, and I have published many times this incident, but here I'm saying it probably for the first time. Squandered was the word that I used about Tony Blair squandering the 1997 kind of majority, the May 1997 election and the majority, because Blair, by the time I raised this question and I made the comment, was already past the abuses of his power and position in massacring the people, innocent children and women and other people in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in creating the hostility, kind of militarized hostility against the person, whoever was a Muslim. And it's a predated by many years, predated Donald Trump, but actually he was a precursor. He and George W. Bush were two main precursors of the narrative that Donald Trump used and exploited to the full in getting into the White House. So this is the diagnosis, because the hostility that Donald Trump has been showing to, quote, Muslims, to the other people from what is called so-called South America, Latin America, Mexico, and others. The hostility, the racism that Donald Trump has personified and been exhibiting is not new in the behavior of the American president. As I have said in print before, Bill Clinton boasted of bombing the Kenyan people or the Kenyan destination. And his wife, Hillary Clinton, when she was the American foreign minister in Obama's kind of administration, Hillary Clinton actually threatened to bomb Iran out of existence. So these are not, what Trump has been saying are not new. And the Democrats have to disown all of these, and disown convincingly and definitively, in order for them to create a credible line between themselves and Donald Trump and his narrative and his agenda. Not for the sake of Muslims only, but for the sake of a peaceful world, for the sake of the environment, for the sake of democracy, and the sake of the future existence of the USA. And the Democrats haven't got a lot of time to do that. And I say this to Biden, whoever is watching this, I don't know whether he will see this, but Biden has got a little time. He must make a definitive, comprehensive, save America kind of statement that includes a complete apology and answer and explanation of all of these wrong and anti-Muslim and anti-race and anti-migrant records of the Democratic Party candidates and incumbents. And he has to set out an agenda for America that is completely different from what Trump has reduced it to. But Trump has reduced it to by using antecedents and records and kind of precedents, examples that is, set and left behind by the Democratic Party candidates in incumbents in the White House. Whether Biden will listen to this or whether he will get to hear this is a different matter, but I have said it. And this is something that sums up, the most acutely sums up the most important way forward that all the observers, ethical, moral, and conscientious observers have been making or thinking of making. Now, in the US media, there is nothing different from the media in the UK and Fleet Street. And the USA media is in denial of the existence of the rest of the world, as is Fleet Street, that in denial of the existence of the whole world. And that denial, like this exceptional thing, is the opposite of their denial normally of the poor and the victims of poverty, injustice, pension injustice. So the newspapers run and the contents are based on a denial of all these realities in the majority of the world. Britain demographically is very small. Britain geographically is very small compared to the rest of the world, the rest of the continent of Europe. And yet, the language used by the Fleet Street papers says that they are bigger than the rest of the world. They're still thinking, as the Sun has said, that the EU has caved in on the city cash and has allowed the City of London banks to trade trillions until 2022. It's like the EU has been scared to confront Boris Johnson or whatever. That's not the view of a sensible thinking, honest newspaper. That's the view of a completely sick, ignorant, and dark ageist outlet that is out to destroy any credible argument or evidence in order to shore up this discredited calamity and actual traitor to society, traitor to country. Boris Johnson is cabal. And the Sun, whose columnists include some of the worst thinkers, worst thinking persons in this country, personified by Trevor Kavanagh, who is sickness personified. These people are in denial of the existence of the world, existence of the rest of society even. And so they are actually confined to a very tiny, tiny, tiny minority of opinion and people in this country. So how is it that they are dominating and they are popular? Because all the people that are affected, all the opposition to this scum and the Daily Express and the Daily Mail have failed to understand that it's no good just being kind of targeted by these liars, but we have to find a way to stop this lying. So there is no proposal on the table or in the offing anywhere in the program of the Labour Party or the opposition to put an end to this kind of lying. It's not okay to allow mass lying to the masses every day. If that is the case, then the masses will be misinformed and the resources of the country and the nation and the world will be abused and the world will be imperiled forever, indefinitely. So in order to stop that, you have to stop the lying. There is no shortage, there is no shortcut to stopping the lying. There is no other way. You cannot make amends after the lying and after the damage has been done or the horse has bolted. You cannot undo the damage after the damage has been done by making an amend, by retraction, by an apology at the bottom of the page on the last kind of section of the paper. It has to be the way to stop the lying. That has to be the norm. Not lying has to be the norm. And lying must be only allowed as an accident, as a genuine accident. Lying by the media and the media carrying others' lies must be made the exception. So they're saying this one. So the Express is saying the test is failing, and the care homes are getting priority in tests. That is not true, because it's a propaganda line they're running. And they're admitting here that Rishi is preparing to get the father, the job-saving kind of short half measure. He's going to stop it and expose people to losing jobs. Now already more than 4 million people out of jobs, as they say. And the Unite Union has asked the Boris Johnson-fronted regime to continue helping businesses keep employees on board. And this is a political commentary from somebody called Team Newark, that a dose of common sense would save a lot more lives. And they've got a column given to Anne Widdecombe. And it is completely typical right-wing column. It has no substance whatsoever, despite the appearance of it being a substance, because it is talking about the American CIA woman who reportedly killed a teenager or a young person. And they're running this Charlie Elphick. He went to jail for 2 years, but as I said before, the 2 years would be completely reduced. And the diaries of this woman, who is the wife of the former MP Hugo Swear, are being treated as a pornographic or semi-pornographic kind of recollection about what goes on in Parliament or in the building, in the houses of, or in the palace of Westminster. And the Express has got a piece about Louis Doucette, who has been accused by the victim of a BBC abuse. That victim suffered post-traumatic stress disorder and is suing the BBC. And she alleges, bullied to take part in the filming. She was bullied by Louis Doucette, and she nearly got killed by the bombing. And here is a 2-page celebration by somebody called David McClure. It's allegedly an exclusive celebration of Brenda, the Queen, getting a 25% pay rise. And it is celebrating how a radical rethink of the royal funding gave the Queen a 25% pay rise and ended ugly rows over the civil list. Civil list is the name given to the arrangement whereby the public funds the Queen. And it's a intentionally misleading kind of name given, civil list. It doesn't say funding the royal or the funding the monarchy. And it says the royal family is about to publish its annual accounts amid concerns over the loss of millions of pounds in visitor revenue during the lockdown. But today, in our final brilliant serial extract from the new book, Royal Finance expert David McClure reveals how the Queen has enjoyed an inflation busting boost since the radical introduction of the sovereign grant. So the Queen has been saved from poverty and malnutrition. That's what they are suggesting, that the Queen is subject to if she is not given millions of pounds. So that's the Daily Express, and its narrative is completely corrupt. It doesn't talk about the ordinary people suffering poverty during the lockdown, anything like that, or the people who are going to lose their jobs, their homes, their savings, and their security, and nothing is recognized. So the newspapers are published on an agenda of denial of the reality. So they're detached from reality. So this is the emptiness, the void created by the denial of reality is in itself a hazard and is bound to make these people receiving these kind of messages going to make them unreal. That is what the majority of the gullibles are. They're turned into believers and thinkers of untruths, or think and the believers in untruths. And so therefore, when there is a kind of trigger, little trigger, like Boris Johnson lied about the Turks, 70 million Turks invading Britain if Britain didn't leave the EU. That was the most scary and scaremongering kind of slogan represented by Boris Johnson and Michael Gove and others during the kind of last days before the referendum in June 2016. Now, the fact is, and the media knew this, and they didn't point this out in any kind of noticeable way. Some may have done in a sideline as a footnote, but they didn't point this out as a noticeable way, as the biggest lie, and it's a lethal lie. That is the one that actually tipped the balance and made the Brexit vote 52% and the anti-Brexit vote 48%. That lie about Turkey takes us back to Brick Lane and the Muslim kind of nature of the community, which is the reason why they targeted the Bangladeshis in the Sunday Times in December 1973. And they have targeted the Bangladeshis repeatedly since then, and we shall come to that, as I said, in the dedicated extra edition. So back to the anti-Muslim line that Boris Johnson capitalized on. He was the leader of the anti-Muslim cries. He said that 70 plus Turks were going to be entitled to come to Britain, meaning they would be invading Britain if the EU was not left by Britain, because the Turks would be coming through Britain. Now, the fact is, the Turks were never going to be even members of the EU. In the EU itself, from Italy to Sweden, whoever is the member of the EU, whatever the countries, there is rock solid opposition to Turkey becoming a member, because Turkey is Muslim and the EU is mainly made of non-Muslim countries and non-Muslim government and anti-Muslim regimes, anti-Muslim propagandists and all the other things. So Turkey cannot be even a member. There is no even agenda for Turkey to become a member. And yet all of that was forgotten and a complete lie was created, and that was the lie on which Boris Johnson still stands, and he is there in number 10 because of that lie. So therefore, anti-Muslim hostility and lying is the biggest capital, political capital for Boris Johnson, and by extrapolation for most of the others in the West. So where is the evidence of that fact being grabbed hold of and tackled, and that kind of lying stopped? not just for the sake of the victims that are Muslim, but for any other religious group, as I was saying earlier. If the Sikhs are targeted, imagine the impact that they would have to suffer. And the Sikhs are targeted because they are kind of second to the Muslim. The Sikhs are the second group that are treated kind of with prejudice in Britain. Not the same case with the Hindus or the Brahmins. And so therefore the distinction is there. There is hardly any outcry against any perpetrator who commits a crime or is kind of accused of, which is the case, majority of the cases, accused of sexually kind of abusing the patient. The majority of the GPs, the Asian GPs in Britain, who are accused of sexually molesting, harassing and abusing their white women patients, their religion is never mentioned. If they are not Muslim, then the religion or their kind of background, the cultural or ethnic background or religious background is never mentioned. So that is the kind of detail of the mentality of these people who write these papers and who write these stories and who perpetuate these kind of media lies and fictions. So extrapolate that kind of lying, the bank of liars. So they apply their kind of lying to deprive ordinary kind of, quote, indigenous white people of the lies about the issues that affect the lives of these white indigenous people, the majority. That's why it's important to find a way to stop the media, Fleet Street lying to the people for the benefit of the majority and benefit of everyone else who is affected by the lying. So it appears that at this time, 9 a.m. GMT today, Gordon Brown is live on Facebook in conversation with the Daily Mirror's Kevin McGuire. We shall take a look later and update accordingly. And before doing that, let's say that Kevin McGuire is not a fit anti-racist or pro-democratic person on the Mirror, because the Mirror itself is a false pretense as the alternative to the Sun and the Express and the Daily Mail. It doesn't go anywhere near opposing or providing an alternative to or answer to the lies and the racism of the Daily Mail, the Sun, and the Express. So their story, front page, is the death of this newborn child. And we shall not reading the details. Now that, I will say, is evidence of the culture of hostility towards animals. I am not by any means underplaying the tragedy of that child being killed. But there is no room in that headline about any possibility that the parents or the family might have been responsible for creating any tension or any other reason for the dog to find itself in that position. So the liability of the human beings in negligence is completely ruled out. And I'm absolutely certain that soon after this happened, this particular dog was murdered or killed as well. That's what happens. A tiger which kills a person who actually invades its territory or another animal is immediately murdered. And there is no room in between to see how human beings might have created the extreme kind of provocation in the particular animal. That is not to underplay at all the tragedy or the loss of the person involved in this kind of events. And there is no information, there is no investigation Otherwise, other than this kind of incident, there is no investigation by the likes of the Daily Mirror into animal mentality, psychology, and the environment in which they are kept. A large number of animals in this country, in the UK, are treated cruelly, as I have said before. And there is no provision anywhere to treat animals kindly or treat them in a way that lessens, reduces, or almost eliminates tension and aggravation. Some of the animals, by nature, are capable of reacting in violent way when they are defending themselves, when they are defensive. Not only in the so-called wild, but even in human company, they are capable of showing extreme violence when they believe that their own safety and lives are at risk, put in danger by the humans around them, whether by negligence or whether by other reasons. So there is no comprehensive, there is nothing actually that actually looks at the relationship between these caged animals or pet animals or whatever and human beings. Local councils, in fact, treat animals as pests, as objects to be destroyed. So the councils don't even recognize the idea of animal welfare, let alone animal rights. And it is of one piece, in one piece, with the rest of the attitude of these local councils, which is one of contempt towards the electors, the communities, which is where Jeremy Corbyn failed to reflect true socialist kind of credentials. He never, ever addressed this issue of the attitude by the council employees, the attitude of hostility and contempt and murderous abandon and disregard for the rights and the lives and the welfare of the people they actually are supposed to be serving from their posts. So all the councils have got a kind of offer on their website and their kind of general public kind of statements that animals are treated as pests. Animals are nuisance. Animals are treated as equal to nuisance. Think about that. So that is how contemptuous they are of the environment itself. And this whole thing about the councils kind of doing their best to reduce kind of rubbish and save the environment from rubbish and clutter and plastic and other glass and other dangers is completely false. Councils are not doing even 5% of the 100% they must do urgently to engage the local neighborhoods, local communities in creating a method, a way of dealing with glass, plastic, and other dangerous kind of rubbish. And this is the same thing with the local neighborhoods being controlled. Most of the neighborhoods and estates in London are controlled, dominated by gangs of criminals. And the council doesn't do anything. The local council doesn't do anything. The local police don't do anything. Take a second to think about that. That's what is happening. And there is nothing in the newspapers collectively about the council's failures, anywhere, about any of that. So this is making a villain of the dog. It's like the legislation that says Dangerous Dogs Act or Dog Act. it bases on the presumption that the dog, by definition, is dangerous or enemy. That's not the case. If that were the case, then billions of dogs would not have been kept as pets by billions of people across the world. So therefore, there is something wrong in the media, in the newspapers, which are lying against dogs, because that reinforces the hatred against the dog, the idea of the dog. And the dog comes across as an image of danger, death, and killing of the human, who is shown in opposition as the victim of the dog. So a lot of the truth being hidden by that headline alone. Now, the Tower Hamlets Council perpetrated a systematic series of anti-animals, anti-cats crimes when Lutfur Rahman was in place as mayor. And the details of that anti-cats crime or crimes will be published here in a dedicated piece or series of pieces, because the details are that long and that kind of intensive. To fully understand the various stages of criminality perpetrated by Tower Hamlets Council while Lutfur Rahman was in post as mayor will be absolutely telling and stunningly relevant to understanding how criminals are operating as employees in local councils. These are criminals more dangerous than gangs of robbers that are allegedly at loose and are still being sought and have been absconding from whatever places or jails or detentions they were kept in. So this diagnosis of the media is far wider than just looking at the newspapers. It is not. So anyone looking at these should be examining every assertion that I have been making and I make, because I make them solely on the evidence, never because there is nothing else to say. That is the basis, the evidence. As I said, in February 2001, a beautiful cat was murdered in the street, Bethnal Green Road, by a driver who killed it and drove away. And the cat I found the cat murdered in the middle of the road early in the morning, because I walked in the street in the area feeding other cats early in the morning, say between 4 and 6 in the morning. Because that's when the cats that I fed would come out expecting the food, and there would be less kind of disturbance from ordinary human activity. And I was walking across the road, to cross the road, Bethnal Green Road, in the early morning. And I was crossing at the traffic kind of junction or the crossing opposite the Tesco Metro in the Bethnal Green Road. And I found this beautiful cat lying dead. And that was in February 2001. Anyone who lost their cat at that time, this was the cat. So the details I am not going to repeat in this one, but basically I contacted the two councils in the vicinity, which is Tower Hamlets Council and Hackney Council. And the treatment of the calls is what I'm basing this on. They were not at all bothered that a cat had been murdered. They were not bothered that a driver had been driving murderously. And they didn't have any concern about the welfare of the cat, let alone for its family, or whoever the family was. There must have been a family that this cat belonged to. An individual or a unit, family unit, whatever. And that is repeated 1,000,000 times every year across London, even to keep within London. Councils are populated by employees who are out of order, who are not held to account about anything. That is the case. Tell me, anyone who disagrees with this, tell me which newspaper says otherwise, which newspaper publishes otherwise, showing that they are accountable. Which newspaper locally, which news outlet so far, local or so-called locally, says otherwise or shows otherwise? None. And I'm talking about all modes and all media, all kinds of media. And the fact that they don't is not their kind of role only, but the fact is that the councils are unaccountable, uncaring, and full of cruel people. Cruel to animals and cruel to the people in the boroughs. And the councillors, even where the council is not kind of controlled by an autocratic post holder, post called the elected executive mayor, most councillors in most councils are completely in denial. And they are in denial because there is no system. The democracy is suspended. Local democracy is not in place, not in active mode. And the reason is there is no movement, there is no campaign by any recognizable, noticeable, visible campaigning force or movement to hold the council accountable. So this is the big detailed backdrop against which Boris Johnson, the lawbreaker, is in power in post. That's the reality. That is the reality. And Keir Starmer is very much of the same kind of mode. What Ed Miliband, I'm giving his full name now, not calling him Miliband as often as I did in the last edition. What he did on Monday was set an example and remind us what is possible. It's only a small thing that he did, but it is a big representation of the opposite, of the complacent collusion. I mean, Corbyn was totally destroyed by David Cameron repeatedly insulting him, including saying that Cameron's mother would want Corbyn to put on a tie and whatever. And Corbyn never retaliated. It's not just his kind of disposition that he doesn't want to hurt somebody or that kind of line that has been paraded about Corbyn, but there is a duty to tell the electorate, the country, that when Cameron crosses the line, he has to be told off and held to account. And that was crossing the line brazenly and disgracefully. Corbyn didn't reply, didn't answer. And when Cameron mocked him for going to France and meeting some asylum seekers or migrants, Corbyn did the same. So Corbyn was intellectually deficient. That is the evidence on which I say that. Intellectually deficient and politically completely out of sync with the needed political action by him. Get that? Any bots that kind of send me messages saying that, I'm being unfair to Corbyn should look at the evidence, the record of Corbyn. So I'm saying this while I'm saying that Ed Miliband did the opposite of what Corbyn did or would have done. And the delivery was also as important. And what I'm saying is that is possible. If Ed Miliband could do that. Anyone else can do that. And they should be starting to do that. Not just about Boris Johnson, because they will not be facing him. They'll be facing somebody else or the House of Commons generally. And when they speak on the kind of BBC platform, they should be doing the same thing. And I'll be coming to the BBC in due course. So what happened in the communication that I had with our Hrs Council and Haque Council was that they kind of blocked my calls or were in denial of my calls, and they would not answer my questions as to what rights and what protections they were operating for cats and what actions they would be taking against the murderous driver. And as I said in an earlier kind of edition, when I was crossing the road and I saw the cat lying in the middle of the road, I also saw at the same time an African man standing outside the Tesco store at that time. And he looked like he was looking at the cat but not doing anything. So I said to him, "Why are you standing there? Have you done anything? Have you seen anything?" And he was completely not speaking. So I rushed to my flat and brought a big towel, and I took the cat with me.